You know, one day I'm gonna make a video, then check the comments and find absolutely no corrections to be made or judgments on my character. And today's not that day. This video had a few fucky wookies, so let's go through them together. Alright, so the most damage in every generation of Pokemon. There was a lot of information to go through for this one, so I do apologise for any mistakes I made throughout the script, which ranged from basic calculation errors to completely overlooking entire strategies for reaching the max damage. Before we get into specific generations though, I do want to address a few common questions and suggestions people had in the comments. First of all, yes, obviously there's no Pokemon that can take a bazillion damage. The goal here was just to stick the raw numbers into the damage formula and see what the highest number we can reach is. This brings me to my second point, that every generation has a damage cap, much lower than the highest damage we can deal, but the video would have been far less interesting if the answer for every generation was just whatever arbitrary number the game code determined the maximum damage could be was. We're also, obviously, assuming we're dealing the max damage roll every time, but I think that one was a given, just think it's worth mentioning here. Moving on, I also wanted to avoid any glitches, so things like the badge boost glitch, for example, was left out of the video. This was because, as far as I was concerned, if you can perform these glitches, why not go a step further and perform an arbitrary code execution to just set a Pokemon stats to max with all the moves you need in as many generations as Ace is possible in. In saying that, very few glitches that were actually usable were relevant to my calculations, and we'll talk about that later. Hello, it's me with Skin this time, and just before we get into the rest of the video, I want to say that this video is sponsored by absolutely no one. That's right, my sponsorship fell through for the month, and I'm left holding the bag. So in lieu of selling out and shilling some product or brand to you, I just want to ask you to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Less than 7.5% of people are subscribed to the channel that watch these videos, and it's a really low number, and I'm not really sure what I'm doing wrong there, to be honest. But apparently the best option I have to get that number up is to just ask, which feels bad every time. I hate asking, so it feels very beggy. But sure, look, so does shilling products every month, so how bad could it be? So yeah, listen, if you haven't subscribed already, that's fine. If I need to earn your subscription, I hope the quality speaks for itself. If it doesn't, that's fine too. And if you are subscribed, thank you so much for your support. It really means a lot. Anyway, I've taken up enough of your time. Let's get back to the video. Okay, let's get into it. Starting off with Generation 1. It's worth mentioning, I made two mistakes in relation to Gen 1 calculations in my last video. One is that I said we had to crit, but of course, for those of you in the know, critting in Generation 1 ignores all stat changes, so we actually have to hit a non-critical hit. The other mistake is that stats in Gen 1 cap out at 999. I had an entire segment dedicated to trying to get Dragonite, the highest attack Pokemon in the game, to be able to simultaneously use Swords Dance and Sky Attack, despite learning neither, and while some commenters are correct and we could get it to use both moves via mimicking Mirror Move, the end result wouldn't actually change because of the cap. This means that my original setup in the video is actually valid. We just need to make sure we actually don't critical hit and calculate the actual damage taking the stat cap and lack of crit into account. I'm aware, by the way, that it might feel slightly contradictory to abide by the stat cap, considering I said earlier I'm ignoring the damage cap. I think that the stat limit is ultimately worth sticking to because it's an intentional part of the game design, as opposed to the damage limit, which seems to be more like a failsafe against weird overflow bugs. And also, the stat cap doesn't exist for most generations, so we're going to abide by it for as long as it exists. So with all of this set up and the stat cap accounted for, actual most damage possible in Gen 1 is 352,459. As promised, let's talk about why we're not using glitches, even if we wanted to. The setup wouldn't actually be all that different if we got access to the glitch decks, even if the stat cap didn't exist. Through sheer happenstance, MissingNo can actually learn both Sky Attack and Swords Dance, and it has 4 more base attack than Dragonite. Unfortunately, it doesn't receive stab on Sky Attack like Dragonite or Dodrio does, because it's not flying type, it's bird type, which is different for some reason. Another important glitch that got mentioned a lot in the comments was the badge boost glitch. In generations 1 to 3, in offline battles, the player gets a 12.5% boost to certain stats from certain gym badges. In Generation 1, there's a massive glitch that caused the game to reapply the badge boost to its relevant stat every time a different stat gets modified. So if you had an attack of 100 after applying the Boulder Badge for the first time, getting hit by a string shot would result in a reapplication of the Boulder Badge, resulting in an attack of 112. As long as the attack stat stays unmodified, you can keep doing this to cumulatively increase your attack. Unfortunately, the boost is still capped by the same restrictions as stats usually have, meaning it's just a sillier way to reach 999 attack before using Sky Attack on an unsuspecting Paris. Good thing that it's capped too, otherwise this would let you deal nearly infinite damage and that would really throw off my graph here. Okay, moving on to Generation 2. Nothing really of note to bring up here. We're still going to use a Rhydon holding a Hearthstone with a max damage rollout into a 1 defense Yanma. Only thing worth pointing out is that the attack stat also caps at 999 in this gen, but don't worry, this is the last time this is the case. With the same setup but our amended attack number, the most damage we can deal is 5,317,301. Alright, Gen 3, I made one mistake here, and it was like at least 60% of the comments. I'm sorry, eggs don't hatch at level 1 in this generation. I've been outed as not a Gen 3 player, that's right, I don't even like Emerald. IGN was correct, there is too much water in Hoenn, and I'm sick of pretending otherwise. Gen 3 shooters, you're welcome to fight me in the comments, I'll reply to each and every one of you making fun of your bad tastes, and... Right, yeah, okay, most damage. So because we don't have access to a level 1 Yanma anymore, we need a Pokemon with a defense low enough at level 5 that after 6 defense drops, it will have 1 defense. Luckily, we can use Ledyba instead with a minimum defense of 7, which will result in a defense of 1, after that -6 defense. We still use a Choice Band, Huge Power Deoxys that's been color changed to rock with 4 times attack and a defense curl, on the last of the rollout with a Helping Hand into a -6 defense Ledyba, for a total of 81,865,764 damage. For the next few generations, while I didn't make any mistakes in execution or information, I'm just going to give a quick recap as to what the strategy was and what the damage totals came out to, just so we're all on the same page. Generations 4 through 7 have more or less the exact same strategy, save for the fact that generations 5 and 6 have access to triple battles, and one other factor. We use a Shuckle with all the following modifiers: Power Trick to turn its highest defense in the game into the highest attack, +6 attack, the Huge Power ability for double attack, Metronome for double damage, Defense Curl for doubling rollouts damage, and a Cherrim with its Flower Gift ability active in the sun for a 1.5 times damage multiplier, using Helping Hand for an additional 1.5 times multiplier. In triple battles in Generation 5 and 6, you can also have 2 of these at a time. In Gen 6 and 7, instead of using Rollout, we use Ice Ball and use the move Forest's Curse to add a 3rd type to our target to make it 8 times weak to ice. I'm blitzing through these generations because not only are they similar, but I've also no amendments to make, and you should already know what I'm talking about if you've seen the previous video. Here are the numbers graphed up so you can see how they all differ. Moving on, Generation 8 is a very interesting one. One thing I majorly overlooked was that I used a Smeargle for my setup, not a Pokemon present in Gen 8. It's not a massive deal because all the moves used by Smeargle could have been used by a Ghastly that knows Reflect type and Mimic to learn Instruct. This means that regardless of our lack of a Smeargle, we're still able to get the most damage possible in the generation. Or at least, we would have if this rollout setup was the most effective setup for dealing the most damage, but it's actually not. A few keen-eyed commenters realised that since Ice Ball got Dexited and we lost our 8 times effective version of rollout, a better approach would be to use a high damage Fire type move. In Generation 8, the Pokemon Colossal was added, along with a fairly useless signature move Tar Shot that lowers the target's speed and doubles the effectiveness of Fire type moves. If we use this in combination with Forest's Curse on an Ice Bug type, we have effectively a Pokemon that is 16 times weak to fire moves. Now we just need to pick a move to use on it. Sure, V Create looks tempting, but an even better idea is to use the move Heat Crash. This move can have up to 120 power if used on a Pokemon with less than 20% of the weight of the user, but that number can be doubled to 240 if the target uses Minimize beforehand. We can still take this further though, because the ability Fluffy makes the user take double damage from fire type moves, but half the damage from contact moves. This would usually result in a physical fire type move like Heat Crash dealing regular damage, but this commenter told me something I didn't know before. Moves used on a substitute don't make contact. Now, is it kind of silly to be dropping the weight of 1,000 suns onto a substitute Teddy while the actual target gets away unscathed? Yeah, but it's still technically the most damage we can do. For our target, we can have a Staryu with the moves Reflect type, Minimize, and Mimic to learn Autotomize. with Autotomize reducing a user's weight by 100 kilos down to a minimum of 0.1, basically anything can deal max heat crash damage to it. We get it to reflect type as Snom, then use Forest's Curse to make it grass type as well as bug and ice type, then reduce its defense to -6. We hit it with a Tar Shot, pass it the Fluffy ability, get it to use Minimize, and then finally use Substitute. And now all we need to do is set up our attacker. We go through a much simpler setup than in the last video since we're using Shuckle this time. After Baton Passing +6 attack, we then use Power Trick to turn Shuckle's highest defense in the game into the highest attack possible in the game. We give it the Libero ability and make it use Sunny Day to make it a fire type, then pass it the Huge Power ability. Now Shuckle uses Mimic to learn Heat Crash and uses it 5 times on Not the Staryu. Last bit of setup required, all we need is our Cherrim with the ability Flower Gift to use Helping Hand, and Shuckle lands a critical hit Heat Crash on the Staryu substitute. Let's do a quick recap of all the modifiers we have. Staryu at level 1 with a defense stat of 1 after 6 defense drops is 8 times weak to fire. Doubled 2 more times from Tar Shot and Fluffy takes a 240 base power critical hit stab Heat Crash from a metronome boosted Huge Power Helping Hand Flower Gift Power Trick Shuckle with +6 attack for a total of 417,098,860 damage. Finally, with nothing to add to the Gen 9 setup, we can add the original damage to our graph, and that's us finished. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I want to give a huge shout out to my Patreon supporters. Your support always helps keep the channel going, even when I don't get a sponsored segment, so really thank you so much. As always, a big thank you to especially 8,700,000 Ants, Chaos Lord Drago, Sean Colgan, and Zed the Man, as well as a real world scientist, Eamon Crawford, Frostfucks, Peter Clare Lomax, Squarka, Sparkfire, The Dirt Man, and Where is Spacebar, as well as everyone else you see here. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video.